Iran sanctions. Rouhani says US afflicted by mental retardation. War with Iran by News 786. Trump administration slaps sanctions on Iran's interior minister. Although sparked by the hike in oil prices, the protests were widely seen as an outcry towards the issues of government corruption and theft, and had the goal of overthrowing the Iranian government. Government mismanagement led to the rapid inflation, which has sent additional 1.6 million Iranians into poverty in just a single year prior to the protest. Iran has been experiencing continuous civil unrest since 2016, with numerous nationwide protests, including the 2016 Cyrus the Great Revolt, 2017 to 18 Iranian protest, 2018 to 19 Iranian general strikes and protests, UK International Air Flight 752 protest, sanctions by the United States and the European Union, coupled with economic mismanagement, were the factors involved in severe economic crisis in Iran in 2010s. Prior to November 2019 cycle of the unrest, the president of Iran, Hassan Rouhani, said, "Iran is experiencing one of its hardest years since 1979 Islamic Revolution." At midnight on 15th of November 2019, the Iranian government announced that they would increase the price on fuel. Prior to price increase, drivers could buy up to 250 liters each month for 10,000 Iranian rial per liter, and then a sudden price increase to 50% to 200%. The 2019 to 2020 Iranian protests were a series of civil protests occurring nationwide across Iran, initially caused by a 50 to 200% approximately increase in fuel prices, calling for the overthrow of the government in Iran and Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. The protests commenced in the evening of 15th of November and within hours spread to 21 cities as videos of the protest began to circulate online. Images of the violent protests were shared on the internet, with protests reaching the international levels. Although the protest began as a peaceful gathering, they soon turned into violent riots and revolt against the Iranian government. The Iranian government employed tactics to shut down the protest, including a nationwide internet shutdown, and according to Amnesty International, shooting protesters dead for rooftops, helicopters, and at a close range with machine gun fire. The Revolutionary Guards reportedly took the bodies of the dead protesters and injured in hospitals to hide the cover-up and the true death toll and downplayed the protest. In some cases, government officials sold the bodies of the protesters, and the protests reached 70% of the provinces, according to The Guardian. On 21st of November, Iran partially restored access to the internet. Residents of Tehran told New York Times that the government had finished securing the northern area, but not the middle class and working class areas of the city. For latest current affair news, subscribe News 786, like and share. According to the residents, as reported by the New York Times, the government forces then proceeded to confiscate the bodies of the dead protesters and truck them away to mask the true casualty count and scale of the protest. Amnesty International wrote that the families of the murdered protesters were threatened by the government from speaking to the media or holding funerals. The government killed 1,500 Iranian citizens and tortured jail protests. The government crackdown prompted a violent reaction from the protesters who destroyed 731 government banks, including Iran's central bank, 9 Islamic religious centers, tore down anti-American billboards and posters and statues of the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, as well as a former leader of Khamenei. 50 government military bars were also attacked by the protesters. This series of protests have been categorized as the most violent and severe since the rise of the Iran's Islamic Republic in 1979. To block the sharing of information regarding the protest and the deaths of the hundreds of protesters on social media platforms, the government blocked the internet nationwide, resulting in near total internet blackout for about 6 days. Tensions between Washington and Tehran have escalated since US President Donald Trump unilaterally withdrew from the Iran nuclear deal with the world powers in 2018 and embarked on a campaign to economically squeeze Tehran through successive rounds of sanctions targeting individuals and entities. The US has continued to apply new sanctions despite calls by United Nations officials and some governments around the world to temporarily suspend such penalties during the coronavirus pandemic. On Tuesday, the Trump administration sanctioned Chinese-based Shanghai Saint Logistics, accusing the firm of acting on behalf of Iran's Mahan, which is also on US Treasury blacklist. Washington accuses minister of committing serious human rights abuses during 2019 protests that swept Iran. United Nations and United States continues to turn the screws on Iran with its maximum pressure, camping announcing round up the sanctions on Wednesday, this time targeting Iran's interior minister as well as senior law enforcement officials over allegations of grave human rights violations. The US Treasury is accusing Iranian Interior Minister Abdul Reza Rahmani Fazli of engaging in serious human rights abuses against Iran during protests that swept the country in November after the government announced a surprise fuel price hike. In a statement, the Treasury said Fazli authorized the law enforcement forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran (LEF) to use lethal force against protesters, resulting in the killing of many, including at least 23 minors. His and the regime's goal was to squash these peaceful protests and suppress the right of peaceful assembly and freedom of expression at any cost, US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said in a separate statement. Washington also barred Rahmani Fazli and Ali Falahi, the head of the Iranian government service from 1989 to 1997, from traveling to US. The US Department of State said Falahi was involved in assassination and attacks around the world.